You're recording, so stop recording. All right, pause it.
Yeah.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming to the Reno Redevelopment Agency Advisory Board meeting. We'll be starting at 11 o'clock, so here in about 5 minutes. If anyone online would like to submit public comment, you're welcome to go to reno.gov/public comment and submit a public comment. And anyone here in the room, we have public comment forms at the top of the table right here, and we will be starting in 5 minutes. Thank you. Great. Mr. Vice Chair, it is 11:02. If you'd like to call the meeting to order and do roll call.
Do that. Thank you, Brian. Meeting called to order at 11:02 a.m. Chair Klein.
Here.
I'm here. Taylor Adams is absent. Kara Harris.
Here.
Jay Kenny.
Here.
Nettie Oliverio.
Here.
Michael Pagney. Kurt Stitzer. Here. Mike Van Houten is online.
Here.
Just read for the record, register that Mr. Pagney is not present. With that roll call, we'll public comment. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes, and I don't know if there's anybody online or in the room who has a public comment registered.
We want to go there. One at a time.
Mr. Art Rangel.
Can you hear me?
Go. We can hear you now.
No?
Yes, we can hear you.
You can, okay. For the record, Art Rangel, 255 North Sierra, within project area number 1. I want to speak to the J Resort application. I'd like to begin by thanking Mr. Jacobs for doing what the redevelopment agency was charged to do, but could not because of the lack of resources. Of course, I'm talking about the elimination of some blight when he took down many of the derelict motels along 4th Street and 2nd Street and helped improve Reno's image. Elimination of blight is a fundamental purpose of redevelopment agencies, but revitalization and making the redevelopment project area vibrant and prosperous is the real goal. My concern is that development of the Jacobs properties will continue to be piecemeal without us knowing what the overall plan is for this very large part of redevelopment project area number 1. How does the application before you today relate to the overall 70+ parcels making up the Neon Line District? The development agreement for the Neon Line District was presented to the community in April of 2021. 4 years later, what's Mr. Jacobs' master plan for this very large part of redevelopment project area number 1? And how does the application before the advisory board today help achieve that plan? The development agreement talked about generating 2,000 to 3,000 residential units and $3.1 billion of economic impact. How and when would this be accomplished? My big concern is that the Globe Plaza and Festival Grounds generate almost no tax increment because of the lack of permanent buildings. In addition, there are many vacant parcels owned by Jacobs, improved only with surface parking lots, again generating no increment. I believe the agency should be looking to maximize Florida area ratio to generate as much tax increment as possible. The application for Bonanza Inn and 2nd Street RHA showed no community engagement meetings on these 2 projects, which probably is why it rated 10 out of 25%. The jobs impact on the application rated 0. There was no market feasibility submitted with this application. I hope the workforce housing is more than casino jobs, because as we all know by now, that casinos in Reno continue to lose market share because of tribal gaming and online gambling, with Harris being the latest major casualty. The casino decline is evident by the city's of Reno's $25 million budget deficit. I'm very hopeful that the city of Reno abandons its 1960s economic model of relying on casino revenues to pay its bills. It is way past time that the city looks to attract high-paying industry sectors as economic engine. In conclusion, I was very encouraged by the ultimate approval of the GSR Stadium. It was very smart of the GSR to team with UNR, the premier institution in Nevada, to help transform the GSR property into something that was very beneficial to Northern Nevada. That project significantly raised the bar with the stadium project and the excellent analysis the Ginsler consultants did on that project. I want to commend the redevelopment staff for retaining Ginsler, who specializes in sports stadiums. After
Thank you,
that
Mr.
approval, I was hoping that others would follow the GSR lead. In my opinion, the Jacobs projects and the related analysis lowers the bar again. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other public comments online? And any in? Seeing none, we'll move on to item A3 in the agenda for approval of today's agenda. We'll need a motion and a second vote on that, please.
I'll make a motion to approve today's agenda.
Moved by member Stitzer.
This is Nettie Oliverio. I will second.
Any, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. And then we also need to approve the minutes for the April 21 meeting of the Redevelopment Agency Advisory Board, which were included in the packet.
This is Nettie Oliverio. I move that the minutes for our last meeting be approved.
Jerry Kenny, I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion on that at all? I wanted just to the notes are fantastic. Just as it's been a minute since we met, and they are very helpful and jog memories well.
AI.
I don't know, we send it off to someone, other office to take care of it.
Yeah.
We have a fantastic.
We did have some challenges with the audio last time, so it was a challenge, there was some gaps, but we have the audio working this time. So if anyone online does have a hard time hearing, let us know, just in the comment section. I think we got it worked out.
All in favor of approving the minutes for the April 21 25 meeting?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And now we've got a council liaison report. Mr. McCardle.
Council liaison is Madam Mayor. She is not here, so we're moving on to 8.6. Okay, liaison report. Great. Just want to update everyone on some of the operations of the agency. Brian McCardle, Revitalization Manager, for the record. We've had some changes with the agency. I'm happy to introduce Caitlin Pietmeyer, who has joined as Management Assistant, keeping the train on the rails. We have hired Dan Tresley. He's been with the city 20 years. And we stole him from the building team to help us lead all of our capital improvement projects. And as well as Rachel, we've given her a new title of Placemaking Manager. She steps into expanding her role beyond activation and events. That was all the good news. The bad news is Maureen West Cuthbert moved back to Chicago. And so her last day is this week, but she's still around if we need her to help on various projects, but we miss her. Our rebrand is going good. We're at a point now where some decisions need to be made. We will likely have more information on the rebrand when we meet next month for your review and guidance on that item. Looking at some past redevelopment projects, the GSR Arena, the participation agreement was signed. They have submitted their permits on July 1st, so that project is moving forward. We have a couple past TIF applications that we're still working through the data on those. That's the red Reno Experience District analysis, as well as Keystone and Fifth. And we have the East Commercial Row project that is starting. We connected them with our consultant a week and a half ago, so those are coming along. We did receive another application for 118 West, which is the Ross Manor project. And it should just be known, since they've started that project, they capitalized their project, they started that project when they did submit, they're technically ineligible. They cannot pass the but-for test if they start their project, because it had to have been deemed reasonable to fund and start the project. So in our participation agreement, a project needs to stall for 6 months before we can re-review it to get them recapitalized and get the project going again. So it's just a signal that if we're gonna do future TIF agreements, the developers need to come to us while they're putting their finances together before they truly start the project. A quick update on Harrah's and Revival. They've received their tentative map. They're tentative mapping the project into 31 different parcels. They're going vertical. The residential will be condo. They're doing the first floor retail, office, the hotel tower, and the plaza is all different parcels, and they're going to take those in different phases. They should have permits in fairly soon. And they are trying to sell off the residential tower. They might not take that project on themselves, but work with a partner on that one. And then I am sure you've heard, but the movie theater is under contract to be sold to Livingstone's Church. We originally, the redevelopment agency does own the parking gallery across the street. The original movie theater was promised every single parking space in that entire structure. And it was specifically for the use of a first run movie theater, because it doesn't look like that's going to be a first run movie theater anymore. They came in, they were seeking a parking agreement. We decided to table that, or they decided to table that. They are just going to, for the moment, pay whatever the same rate is. Most of the businesses down there, for 6 cents a square foot, they get unlimited parking validation for the time they need. And so the agreement, if we did one, was to reserve capacity. So in case in a future point in time where capacity does become an issue, they would have like first right to their parking spaces. But at the moment, parking capacity doesn't seem to be a challenge over there. But that one might come back.
The latest I've heard this morning, Kurt Spitzer for the record, is that their Midtown landlord is now actively in conversations with them about selling it in the current facility, which they're contemplating.
Okay. Thank you for that. In the meantime, it's likely we will do a utilization study of the parking structure just to find out how much capacity we do have, time of use, how often does it get used on nights and weekends, special events, so that we can better manage that facility. It is one of the only assets the redevelopment agency owns. In addition to that little asphalt lot next to the Lee Plaza. So we'll look into that. We'll kick that off and we'll bring that back for this advisory board to review. We have 2 projects that are currently finishing up downtown. These are the last 2 projects of those first 1,000 units that we talked about. And one is that 18 West project that is the former Ross Manor. And then there's a project on Winter Street of another 64 units. Those are the last 2 projects to be completed. But Pine Street Townhomes on Pine Street has started their earthwork. So that's 48 townhomes. And in the pipeline, we have 1,054 new housing units that are either currently under discussion, currently seeking a TIF agreement. That includes the Ulysses Affordable Housing Project on 4th Street, the Conroe Townhomes on the river, 5th and Keystone, Red, and the Riverside Drive parcel. Although it's not in the redevelopment area, it's fairly close. And that we should have news on that one any day now. That's been tied up with a title issue, but that should be clear. If all those projects proceed, that's another 1,054 units in the urban downtown area.
RDA 1 or RDA 1 and 2?
1 and 2, yeah. And immediately adjacent, yeah, yeah. Some improvements have been done. I don't know if you've seen, but West Street Plaza and Locomotion Plaza have been fully renovated and completed. We have hosted a ton of events. Rachel's been her entire summers taking up, utilizing those spaces to host events, as well as the antique fair that gets put on along Virginia Street. But you said the other day that we're 36% increased in new special events within the downtown area. And we thank you for sort of providing guidance on the budget. With $500,000, the redevelopment agency board approved the purchase of these mobile vehicle barricades that are a lot more secure for public safety. It's sort of a best practice across the nation to do these because bollards are no longer best practice to prevent any sort of security incidents. We are working on the trail behind the Auto Museum with the Public Works Department. That should be sort of a phase one. It's at 30% design. We were talking to the museum about working with them to get a little bit more space to do the improvements. The alternative is doing a cantilever path behind the museum, and that's a bit cost prohibitive, but those conversations are ongoing. The Community Assistance Center on Record Street is likely to get demoed in the next 2 weeks. That'll start soon. I think the soft demo is already taking place. And we're waiting on property appraisals for the properties that the redevelopment agency plans to purchase from the city of Reno. That is a pretty good summary. We have a few projects related to the Restore program that are finishing up. If you haven't seen the Reno Mart building on the corner of 2nd and Virginia, removed all their awnings. El Cortez has submitted permits for a new frontage on the Tonic building and the sort of store next door. And we're waiting on Yuzu Sushi to open on Virginia Street further up. And if those get completed, that's kind of our first round of Restore awardees to get completed. And on our agenda today is talking about the next round of Restore. So that's a lot of updates. We've been fairly busy. We have a new and expanded team. And that is my report. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Can you just speak to the Plaza fencing?
Yep. So Believe Plaza, just like Brian McCardle for the record, just like any plaza or park, it can be rented out. Part of the city's policy is when you do have a special event, you do need to make space in your event plan for a free speech area that can of a size of your choice. And so the Downtown Reno Partnership did receive some ARPA funds to put on a rolling Reno event for the month of June, July. It ends August 7th. 10th. Okay. So another week or so. And the site plan was just to fence all that off. They have seating, food trucks. They have a container of rentable roller skates in that area. And so they got a special event for that, put up the fencing, and yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was just interested because Colin Robertson, for the record, seen a bunch of people asking questions about that.
And Rachel is here if you'd like to ask her any questions, she can respond.
With that, we move into agenda item B on the TIF application review for consideration and recommendation of a tax increment financing catalyst project application from Jacobs Entertainment Incorporated for the Jacobs Entertainment expansion to include the Bonanza Inn redevelopment, West 2nd Street Reno Housing Authority project, Glow Gardens, Festival Grounds, North Expansion, and Rolling Arc Banquet Hall. This item is an item for possible action. And do you want to introduce Mr. McCardle?
Sure. So Brian McCardle for the record. This is staff has received a TIF application from Jacobs Entertainment related to this. And if I could just summarize, I think the original application had the build out for the Bonanza Inn that's now the Breeze, and that's a rehab of that facility. The other site is on 2nd Street, and that is for 65 units of affordable housing. And the trick is that that's going to get given away to the Reno Housing Authority, at which time that property will not generate property tax. And so it's very hard to do a TIF application to support a housing project when that housing project isn't generating future property tax. When you go and expand out and look at all the projects that Jacobs Entertainment is currently undertaking, and because those are $95 million of new development, it was deemed we could make it a catalyst project and look at all the property tax increment being created from all the projects going on that could help support those two housing development projects. And so the application was received. It met our criteria to be considered in front of this body. If it's approved today, it doesn't go to the redevelopment agency board. We send it directly to our consultant to do a feasibility and gap analysis that'll identify what the true gap is to make this project feasible and doable, which would pass the but-for test without a redevelopment law. And only at that time will we start negotiating how big is that gap and how it can be filled with tax. funds for the redevelopment agency. So with that, Garrett, we have your presentation. Do you want us to?
That'd be great. Yeah,
Okay.
pop it up. I'll just say move forward and not click or anything.
No, just tell us, we'll do it. You wanna introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to present today. For the record, my name is Garrett Gordon. I'm an attorney at Womble Bond Dickinson. I had the pleasure of representing Jacobs Entertainment now for the last 7-8 years. I've been involved in all 74 acquisitions of each parcel. Each one has a unique story. Maybe I can write a book one day. But nice to be before you for TIF. I'm gonna move forward with a little presentation and then happy to answer any questions afterward. And also with me today, Jessica Surprise, who's part of the development team. Next slide. So part of the application requires, given a little background of what else the Jacobs team owns and operates. Ohio, Colorado projects. You can see the left-hand side, the Knock Entertainment Complex. Pretty cool complex. Been around since 1987. It's on the west bank of the Flats in Cleveland, Ohio. It includes a 5,000-seat entertainment venue. So certainly Jacobs is in the entertainment business. That's why he wanted to move forward with the Glow Plaza Festival grounds, focused on the entertainment side. Also runs the Greater Cleveland Aquarium, 70,000 square foot facility. There's been some talk of trying to maybe move an aquarium in and around this area as well. And then the windows on the river is a banquet facility with 3 event spaces, and you'll see eventually banquet spaces at the J Resort. So cool about the Nautica environmental complex, entertainment complex is it also was a public-private partnership. There was an urban development action grant that was issued for it, and it met the but-for funding mechanism for that urban development project, and also it checked the historic preservation tax credit finding. So certainly he's been in the business of public-private partnerships for a long time and looks forward to one with the city of Reno. Also owns 2 casinos in Blackhawk, Colorado, the Lodge Casino and the Gilpin Casino. The Lodge is about 44,000 square feet of gaming space, 50 hotel rooms, been operating since 1998. And the Gilpin has been operating since 1992, about 14,000 square feet of gaming space as well. Next slide.
Hey, really quick, is there a slide deck that the online people are supposed to be seeing for this? I don't know if you're screen sharing or not, or.
Oh, you do need screen share.
Yeah, please do.
I'll take the mayor's.
That's easy.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, Mike, for mentioning that. Can you see?
Hey, no problem. Yeah, I can see it now.
Great.
It's the presenter view, but I can still see it.
All right, we might have to deal with that.
That's fine.
Good, keep going. Okay. So turning to Nevada, J Resort used to be the Sands Regency. Jacobs acquired the Sands Regency in 2017. Invested a couple $100 million, and I'll repeat that again because the number gets thrown around a lot, but hundreds of millions of dollars invested in the J Resort. Had a little bit of a flooding issue last week, but that got resolved and it's open and operating for business. All 730 rooms were refurbished, and also casino expansion, art integration, digital display, the big 65 by 55 square foot video display on the north facade, Hannah's Table, 3-meal restaurant, J. Paul's Italian Steakhouse, Afterglow Lounge, certainly an investment in downtown Reno, and I think we can all agree who were born and raised here, an upgrade to the good old Sands. Gold Dust West Casinos, Jacobs owns the one in Reno, of course, the one in Carson City, and also the one in Elko. So it has those 3 properties in northern Nevada. Next slide. Continuing with the J Resort, so downtown Reno, the J Resort's Reno Neon Line District. I'm sure you've seen the wall that kind of runs from West Street all the way down to Keystone.
lights installed on there and kind of have different lights and colors depending on the time of year, Christmas, St. Patrick's Day, Halloween, really tying in the art and neon aspect of the line, as well as the hundreds of thousands of dollars invested in a lot of the old Burning Man art, some additional art, some local artists, some national artists, international artists, to really create this neon line entertainment and arts district. The festival grounds kicked off this summer, 15,000 square foot facility, already had a country festival, a reggae, hip hop festival. I'm sure you were there with Too Short.
No, I skipped
you
E40.
skipped E40. And then an alternative band this weekend. So certainly want to be diverse, and create as many opportunities as possible. Pretty cool for folks, again, who have been here for a long time. Downtown Reno has been referenced as a concrete jungle, and having real grass, over an acre of real grass in downtown Reno is pretty special. And then the J Resorts Glow Plaza, which is just to the west of the site, seats seating capacity 5,000 folks. Certainly been a great venue the last couple years, and we anticipate another great summer season, including Hot August nights that the J Resort is hosting, and certainly we'll have a number of acts at the Glow Plaza. Next slide. Then we just finished the apartments. So this was, I think, a very good public-private partnership as well, and certainly shows that Jacobs, when he makes a commitment, he follows through, no matter the cost. Part of this land was City of Reno land. Jacobs paid market value for that land, no discount, no subsidy, wrote a check to the City of Reno and made a commitment that he would A, build housing, and B, also have 10% for seniors. So this is complete, it's on the corner. Certainly, I think there's an improvement to what the townhouse used to look like on this corner. And as we'll talk about, has significantly impacted and increased, as of all these projects, the tax base now in RDA1. Next slide. Just want to note, Mr. Fong is our architect, local. It was important to have a local architect. He designed 245, as well as working on some of these other elements that I'll talk about today. Next slide. So I know one of the public speakers mentioned, public commenters mentioned this development agreement. So going back to 2022, 2021, this was contemplated of where I'm sitting today. We did a couple things in that agreement. One is, you can see we created Reno's Neon Line District that has Keystone as a boundary to the west, West Street to the east, 2nd Street to the south, and then 80 to the north. Obviously includes more properties that owned by folks other than Jacobs. Not one person objected to being included in this area, and certainly folks have marketed their properties as being within the district, and have certainly got a premium for selling their properties located in the district. But I wanted to note that it has been contemplated since 2022 that this district would be created and that TIF would be used. Your downtown action plan absolutely talks about providing housing choices in downtown Reno. That's what we're talking about today, housing, and certainly using TIF for blighted and underutilized properties. I think hopefully we can all agree that the Bonanza is a blighted, underutilized piece of property. I'll talk a little bit about the RHA deal we cut, which I also believe will be improving a blighted, unutilized property with the Reno Housing Authority. But this has always been contemplated. Mr. Jacobs has certainly kept his end of the bargain, invested in hundreds of millions of dollars into this district. I think it's safe to say that RDA1, which has been in the red for many, many years, because it has other encumbrances, bond payments and other payments, is finally out into the black. Solely, not solely, but for the most part, due to the ballpark apartments, which has been important, but Mr. Jacobs' investment in downtown Reno has risen this tax base. So we're here today to propose a public-private partnership as was contemplated in 2022. Next slide. So here's a little snapshot of kind of the heart of the district. So you can see 4th Street, where Glow Gardens is shown, J Resort North expansion is shown. Above those highlighted blocks is 4th Street. So you can see all in green is kind of currently developed. is what includes the J Resort, the expansion of the J Resort, the Glow Plaza. And then as we move forward to more new development, you can see the Glow Gardens, which is where the old wedding chapel is located. And if you recall or may have seen over the years, we preserved two historic homes. One's on a lift, but just behind that location. And another one will be relocated. So the idea is to create really a little cool urban retail area that has a lot of historic significance. And then the festival grounds, of course, is up and running. The J Resort North expansion, as Mr. Jacobs likes to say, J Resort will finally have a front door off 4th Street. The porte cochere and some parking and some expansion of the rolling art, some European car exhibitions that really finalize the J Resort. And then 245 North Arlington, you can see also this new development that we just pulled a C of O on that project. What's proposed today is two things. One, you can see in the top right-hand corner, 56 unit workforce housing called The Breeze, which is the old Bonanza Casino. The Bonanza Inn was owned by a family where the matriarch passed away. It went to probate court and there was an auction. Mr. Jacobs went in there. I went in on behalf of Mr. Jacobs. I was the only one who made a bid to buy that property, blighted property, and now we're making an attempt to clean up that property with a public-private partnership of TIP. Also down below, you can see the 65 unit apartment label there in yellow. So that currently is vacant. That's currently owned by Jacobs Entertainment. You can see in the middle of this slide, wish I had a little red clicker, but I'm just gonna state it. You can see here, this building right here is currently owned by the Reno Housing Authority, Saris and Arms. It's been there for decades. It's in decay, and the tenants there certainly would love to relocate to a new home. Our proposal with RHA, which is already inked, the document is recorded, is a swap. We build them a brand new 65 unit housing project worth approximately $25 million in exchange for an appraised value of that property, $5 million. Now, why would we do that? Doesn't seem like it's very fair on Jacob's side, a $25 million new building in exchange for a $5 million piece of property. Well, one, you can see certainly it's in the center of the district, so it's important. But also we made a commitment from day one with RHA and in our development agreement and to the city council that we would continue to bring housing to this district. And so we worked out this deal with RHA where we build them a building, we do a swap, but we need some tax increment financing in order to do so. So we'll talk a little bit about that shortly. Next. So here's project number one. So this is the Bonanza Inn property. 57 unit, $10 million affordable workforce housing development at the Bonanza Inn, which will be rebranded as The Breeze. The proposed units are designed to provide quality and affordable rental housing for middle-income workers who are essential to Reno's economy. This project will help address the increasing demand for housing in downtown Reno, offering living opportunities for individuals and families earning 80% of AMI. That'll be a recorded deed restriction on this site, 80% AMI. The project will help ensure that essential workers can live, work, and thrive within downtown Reno. The project is located in an area with access to employment hubs, public transportation, and community amenities, ensuring convenient and cost-effective living for its residents. The unit mix as proposed by our architect is 55 studio units, 2 one-bedroom units, again with 80% AMI. Community amenities include pool, social room, fitness center, and secured parking. I think this will be a very welcome project to the area to clean up the old blighted Bonanza Inn. Next.
What's AMI right now?
The current, I don't know.
About 73,000.
Hey, really quick, Mike Van Houten, for the record, on that deed restriction, is that permanent or is there a certain year length on that?
Typically those, don't go in perpetuity. They run for 20 or 30 years, but Mike, it's a good question. I can certainly get back to you on that one. Then project number 2. So you can see on the left, Sarah's and Arms building, certainly, blighted and certainly could use a little love. Here we are proposing to swap properties. So we would first construct, you can see on the right-hand side there, the shorter building is the Gibson. That is an existing building. Jacob's made a commitment to the mayor and city council that that building be preserved. So he's invested millions of dollars to rehab that old historic building, and currently there's tenants living in there. To the east of it is a vacant lot, and that lot is where you can see we're proposing to build a 4-story Reno Housing Authority project. And once that project is constructed, we would then do a swap where we take ownership of Saracen and they take ownership of that site. As Brian eloquently mentioned, there would be no property tax associated with that site, which is why, again, in our larger vision back in 2022, we created a district, we've invested in the district, we've created increment. Now we're asking to go to your third-party consultants to figure out how much that increment should be used for these 2 housing projects.
For the record, Chair Harescare, is the initial building, how many units are in the building that Reno Housing Authority has now?
It's 60 and we're doing 65. So Reno Housing Authority, the tough negotiators, wanted more than,
Perfect.
excuse me, more than we're currently there. And Saracen would go on the tax rolls, that's correct. So, yeah,
So during the swap, you have the Saracen would go on and the other would go off.
exactly, correct, good point, Jess. And again, it's just worth pointing out that Saracen is currently appraised at 5 million. We anticipate this new building will be a $25 million project.
So Nettie Oliveria for the record. So yes, Saracen would go on the tax rolls depending on what it's used for.
Correct, it would go on when we close as is, and then, yeah, once we improved it, the value would only go up. Yeah, great point.
But Nettie, right now it's paying no property tax because it's
Right,
already
'cause it's-
down.
Right.
And then it would go on once he bought it. It's the
Right.
same with it. If you look at the property tax increment from 245, it was a city, if you recall that old city parking lot. And depressed value of, I
The
forgot what was
town-
there, Garrett, on that.
The townhouse.
hotel, The townhouse,
The
yeah.
townhouse. And it was mentioned in public comment, kind of, well, what's the vision? You can see we're working diligently to put the vision together, but the vision on Second Street is clearly housing. Have some really nice, beautiful housing, starting with 245 North on the corner of Arlington and Second. Then as you move westbound, you're gonna have the RJ building. You continue to move westbound, you have the Rehab Gibson. And as you continue to move westbound over Ralston, you'll see in the future some additional ideas for housing. Next. So numbers, so just to be clear, the only ask is to apply TIF from the district to these 2 projects. So you saw in the application that we mentioned the Glow Gardens, festival grounds, the apartments, etc. Those new projects, along with the current $12 million plus the forecasted $12 million plus taxes that will be generated by what Jacobs has already done, will only be applied to these 2 buildings. So we're not asking for any TIF for Glow Gardens, any TIF for festival grounds, any TIF for the apartments. We're saying the increment used and created by those new projects, we believe an appropriate use would be for workforce housing and for the RHA project. So you can see the ask here, and again, I know we have to go sit down with your consultants who are very competent. I've been working with some on the RED project already. We've been back and forth. They're very diligent. So we know today's request is to go take this project and send it to the consultants. But you can see the top left-hand side, Bonanza Inn, bought it for 3 million. Gonna take 9 + 1 to get it done, about 13 million. So our tip ask is 10 million for that building, to get it up and running. And then for the housing authority, the land we bought 1.5. The hard cost plus the soft cost be about $25 million project. Jacobs would put in 14 million of equity roughly, and so the tip ask is 11 million. So the overall ask for these 2 buildings for workforce housing and an RHA project is approximately 21 million. Next slide.
Let me ask you a real quick question, Kurt Stitzer for the record. So on the construction of the Second Street RHA building, is that to be done under prevailing wage and all the normal requirements that would be in place for an RHA project, or is that being built private using market rate stuff and then the transfer happens?
That's a great question. Because we would reimburse ourselves from TIF, we envision paying prevailing wage for both the Bonanza and the RHA project. So yes, prevailing wage for both, because we'd be reimbursing ourselves for both projects. So again, I know these pro formas are typically worked through with the consultant, but I thought this was important to give you a little picture as well. So you can see on the left-hand side, it says development costs. So north expansion, Mr. Jacobs investing another 26 million into this community to finish the J Resort. Glow Gardens, 14 million, Rolling Art Banquet Hall, 14, Festival Grounds was 5. Bonanza Inn, as I mentioned, would be 10. Affordable housing would be 25. Arlington, we just finished at a cost of 33.3 million. So you can see development costs for all those are about 130 million. You can see, you go down to property taxes. You can see the property taxes, and this is projected out for, and then you guys dealt with this with Grand Sierra for RDA 2, the only 10 years. This is RDA 1, so it goes out a little longer. But the projected property taxes for these projects are 26.2 million. And we're asking to use 21 of that for 2 housing projects, which is about 80%. I know Grand Sierra came in here and said 90% and 90-10, and our ask going to the consultant based on our numbers is using 80% of the TIF generated by these commercial projects in order to build a 50-unit workforce housing project and a RHA affordable housing project that would be deeded to RHA. So there's certainly some left over. We're not asking for everything. And we're just asking it for purposes of 2 housing projects. And again, subject to the but-for test, subject to all the legal requirements, and you make a good point, Mr. Sitzer, to paying prevailing wage on both those projects. Next slide. So staff is recommending to advance this application for the due diligence, the gap analysis to the third-party consultant. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you for the time and look forward to hopefully working with the consultant and coming back to this body with an agreement that meets all the legal requirements of the but-for test, community benefit, etc. Thank you.
$2 surcharge that will benefit the city, because they're the only 2 that pay at Caesars. Yeah, I just wanted to point out, I know it's,
You identify yourself.
I'm sorry, Jessica Sproza for the record. I think, and Brian and Ashley could probably elaborate on this. There's 2 properties, and this goes way back to my council days, that go into the $2 surcharge that help the city with the bowling stadium and downtown event center, and that is the J and Caesars Entertainment. I think you can say the occupancy, since it's been transferred from the Sands to the J, you haven't a much higher ABR, which goes towards the road tax for the city, but also that $2 surcharge is increased because of the revitalization of the area. So it's only the J and Caesars that pay that additional $2 surcharge that goes to the city, but that helps with the maintenance of those buildings. Just want to put that in the record.
Is there a comment online?
Mike Van Houten, sure, for the record, I have a couple of questions. Once the swap happens, does Jacobs have any plans for this Sarah's and Arms apartment? Is he going to keep it residential or?
That's a great question, Mike. I think it would not remain residential.
Okay.
Likely move forward with that entertainment block that it's morphing into.
Okay, awesome. And one more question. When you are basically tax incrementing an entire district, does that affect other projects in that district that might also apply for tax increment financing or other projects in RDA 2? Because I know like when it's just one project and its own increment, it's different that multiple projects can use tax increment financing because they're utilizing their own tax increment. But when you're utilizing the tax increment of the entire district, does that choke any other projects in RDA 2 that might also want to apply if all but 5 million of that projected increment is going towards J Resort? Or is that only from J Resort's properties that tax increment was projected?
So it's a good question. So yes, we created the district contemplating TIF. What we're proposing now is pulling TIF only from Jacobs properties. But I would be remiss if I didn't say, and I'm sure Brian will correct me if I'm wrong, and this is all in RDA 1, right? So RDA 2 is flush with cash.
Yeah, I meant RDA 1, sorry.
RDA 1 has a significant number of encumbrances, which has taken a long time, I would argue, thanks primarily to Jacobs, to get above and start having some cash flow to do this. So it's a great question because yes, we are gonna have to work with Brian and Ashley and the consultant to understand if it's not like RDA 2 where every dollar of TIF could be used for a project, potentially every dollar of TIF in RDA 1, just throw a number out, 50 cents are encumbered and 50 cents are available for TIF. So it's a little more difficult math because the TIF is encumbered by some other existing debt. But that said, we don't anticipate impacting anyone else's projects because this is the TIF we have invested and this is the TIF generated by projects that we have invested in and constructed.
Gotcha, okay. So it's not coming from the district, it's only coming from the projects of Jacobs in the district.
Projects I showed on the pro forma.
Gotcha, okay.
We go back to the pro forma slide.
Kara Harris, for the record, just clarification. So that does not include any future projects that Jacobs intends to do in some of those spaces. Is that correct?
That's correct. As projected, the 26.2 million of taxes that you can see are from currently developed properties of his. North Expansion, Glow Gardens, Rolling Arts, Festival Grounds, Bonanza Inn, RHA. You can see, of course, RHA has nothing there. And then the apartments. So that would be 80% of those 10 or so items.
So there is future projects and the development of the future projects, they take over the RHA, that should increase.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
So Kurt Stitzer for the record, as we look at this, and it's creative for sure, on applying previous investment into the bigger picture of what we're considering for this TIF financing, would these projects then be reconsidered again for future applications of TIF projects if you guys like to go that way, or do they now become encumbered and burdened only by these two residential building asks, and how is that going to be handled in the future?
I would argue, my understanding would be that if this was approved as is, subject to the third party consultants, but as is, yeah, you would encumber 80% of the property taxes for all those items in the bottom left for the life of RDA one to pay back the $21 million to build out Bonanza and our chip. You couldn't go now and put another
Reuse
layer.
these same buildings
Reuse
for
it.
other
Yeah,
projects.
this,
That's what I was.
and so that's what Jacobs is proposing is from all of his investments and all of his growth of this district, both what it looks like today and these new 5 or 6 items, what should we do with that TIF? And he's saying we should use it for workforce housing and RHA. I'm not sitting here asking we should use it for the north expansion, we should use it for more casino space. I'm saying we should use this for housing, which is what we committed to do when we went to the city council.
And in theory, what that means is that then only 20% of the remaining balance of those increment funds are available. And at the same time, future development will increase tax base alongside that.
So says Colin Robertson.
Well, that's, I mean, that was a
No,
question.
no,
That was a question.
you didn't identify yourself.
Oh, yes.
And Mr. Vice Chairman, it's a great point, and that's why we look forward to working hopefully with your third-party consultants, because they may come back and say, hey, to meet the but-for test, when we look at your capitalization and your performance and what you're proposing, you know, maybe it's not 80%, maybe it's 70, or maybe it's 30, or maybe it's 90. So whatever the number is, I'll come back to you with a stamped report from your consultant saying, this is what makes the most sense, including the breakout I'm showing here, including what else is in RDA one and what debt is there. And to your point, what does the future look like and how does this impact it?
Keelan, could you go to the map? The parcel map. Is everything in yellow and blue? This is Colin Robertson for the record. Is everything in yellow and blue currently controlled by Jacobs?
Yes. And great.
And green?
Yes. And so Art Rangel's public comment and out of personal curiosity, do you guys have or have you advanced a look ahead for the remainder of the development? Is that something that you guys are willing and able to disclose? I'm talking specifically to like that north center parcel that's totally vacant, the parcel to the east of the Jay's parking lot, some of these other things on Third Street, or is that, you know, I mean, just to try and get an understanding of what the overall vision and future build out upon stabilization of all this stuff is.
And I think I'll start with what you ended with, stabilization, right? He's invested $500 million into this and certainly hasn't even come close to making it back yet. So
Understood.
Calling and clawing, frankly, to get the J Resort Club, to get the J Resort finished. Festival Grounds is kicked off. Glow Plaza is done. So I think the idea was, let's get the heart of the entertainment district built out to get people and their families from coming back down to Reno again, downtown, also coming over the hill and really enjoying and staying and playing in this area that hasn't been done. And as we work our way out, as I mentioned, along 2nd Street, you can see that's turning into kind of a residential corridor.
Yeah,
You have
between
apartments.
245 and the RHA.
Exactly. And then Bonanza need to get cleaned up. I mean, I can say on the Keystone block where the Chevron is, right? That was listed for sale, looking for a residential builder as a partner. We were under contract and then COVID happened, right? We were also under contract for residential builder up there on 5th Street. Really cool East Coast builder, had some great ideas. It was listed for anyone. And that also, COVID happened. So I think we're focused on the entertainment, focused on really cleaning up some of these blighted areas so people feel comfortable there. And then we'll continue to build out the district in in future years.
And Chair, how long the development agreement, I just want to state for the record too, the development agreement is a 20-year agreement. So I think he was upfront of how long it would take to assemble the properties. As you guys know, you've seen every project come and they say, we're gonna do this. Well, land acquisition was very important as part of the overall district.
I think that's fair, because I worked on, I mean, I had the privilege of, years ago, I worked on the ACES TIF deal and the Star One deal for the ACES, and that property across the street, the Freight House District, was envisioned to be built out, built out. It finally just got built out 10 years ago, right? It finally penciled and makes sense. Now we have those apartments. I also working on the red, the old Park Lane Mall, where I would do my back to school shopping. And I got demoed and it sat there and for almost a decade until red comes in. So I think if you look at the history of these big multi-million, if not billion-dollar projects, it takes some time. Oh, sure. But I think hopefully all of you have seen and appreciate the progress, but there's a lot more to come.
Yeah, to the comment that it was piecemeal, there seems to continue to be piecemeal. I was curious if there was any more clarity that you could provide, but the response makes total sense. And that was Kurt Stitzer.
Could you go to the slide about the RHA project? I just had a question about the, there was a line item in a kind of short budget that said $14 million in equity as part of the math.
Yeah, go ahead, keep going a little forward, right to the, should be right before the pro forma, or the end. Keep going, keep going, keep going. One more.
Going.
Right here. So we anticipate that the RHA building, which we have an agreement with RHA already signed, as an exhibit is all their wish list of what they want there for their tenants. So we kind of know what has to be in the building. Priced it out, and we think it's going to be a $26.5 million building. As I mentioned before, Arlington next door was $33.3 million. We just finished that, so we have a good idea of what it takes to build. I'm sure Mr. Sitzer has a very good idea as well. But you can see land acquisition was 1.5. Equity of what we would put in, 14 million of our own money into that deal, and then asking for 11 million of TIF. And then that property goes to RHA, and then we take the Sarasota.
Mike Van Houten for the record. So the increment that will actually happen to go back to Jacobs, is that going to happen after the certificate of occupancy is issued for these buildings? I'm just thinking, like, I noticed this project doesn't start until 2026. And if there's, a huge, something catastrophic happens and construction costs double, I just want to make sure this is dependent, the increment is dependent on those buildings actually finishing.
That would be my understanding. I mean, the devils will be in the details of the agreement, but that would be my understanding. You have to finish it in order to be eligible for reimbursement.
Gotcha.
This one is accrued over the duration of the year.
Correct.
Mike, this is Colin for the record. I feel like we would need to stipulate that in a motion that for the review with the consultant, that is something we want to see happen.
Yeah.
That's part of the law anyways.
I agree. I think that's the law anyway. And you'll see the final agreement will come here before it goes to council, so we can make sure that's in there. But that's my understanding.
Are there any other questions or comments about item B1 in this TIF application review? I don't. If there's any hands raised on Zoom. Okay, with that then, is there any further discussion of this item for the draft board? Not,
Do we have to do a motion before we do discussion?
We do have to do a motion for further discussion.
Gotcha, okay.
So we can entertain a motion, Mike, to proceed there.
I'm looking for the motion in this packet. Need staff report? Kurt Stitzer for the record. I'd like to propose a motion to approve the advancement of the Jacobs Entertainment tax increment financing catalyst project application to due diligence, financial gap analysis, and negotiation with the additional clarification, if it's not already part of state law, that the TIF financing will not go into effect until certificates of occupancy have been achieved for both buildings and the transfer of the project to Reno Housing Authority has been completed.
Mike Van Houten, I second that.
Thank you, Mike. Discussion on that motion on the table. Any questions from anybody in the room or online? Okay, seeing none. All in favor of the motion as read by member Stitzer?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thanks, you guys. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate everyone's service.
Okay, on to item C in the agenda. C1 is the Restore Facade and Tenant Improvements Program, which is a review of proposed eligibility criteria, application, and scoring process for discussion only.
So I can preface this, Brian McCardle, Revitalization Manager for the record. So we did with ARPA funds, council gave us direction to put $1 million, it was actually $500,000 towards facade improvement and $500,000 towards tenant improvement to help renew and revitalize storefronts primarily throughout the entire city. It wasn't, because it was not redevelopment funds, it was restricted to RDA 1 or 2. But we built it that it was primarily focused on Main Street districts, high visible areas, really challenging problem areas. I think we approved about 19 locations, over 30 projects, both received facade and TI improvements. Some of those are Birdie's downtown, 406 California Avenue with the new Derby was one of those projects, all the way down to, what's the country store on 4th Street that sells D-Bar-M. Had 50-year-old carpet, and they decided they wanted to fix the carpet and redo their sign and just do some touch-up paint. And so from small impactful projects to complete overhaul of buildings, that program deployed $1 million. It was fairly successful. I think we got 13 new businesses out of that project. And so now with your guidance on the budget, we have another $1 million for this project. The difference now is that it's being split $500,000 in RDA 1 and $500,000 in RDA 2. So it doesn't need to be facade. We could do all facade, we could do all tenant improvements. We can only invest $500,000 in RDA 1 and $500,000 in RDA 2.
And only in those RDAs.
Correct. So we have, from what we learned last time, we've made a few changes, mainly to the eligibility criteria. We had a lot of small homes that were either like law firms or dental businesses that were trying to do a complete rehab of the structure. We've said this time around that dental, healthcare, and medical sort of uses are ineligible. We put in that tattoo parlors are ineligible, although some people have asked, are we past the point of criticizing tattoo parlors, or are they're not viewed the same way they were 20 years ago? And one unique part about that is for new construction, new development, is we said if somebody's building out new ground up or a complete redesign of a project, it should be the developer's responsibility to get that up to a certain stage where you have certain furnishings, finishings and furnishings that a tenant can come in. And so what we're saying is that the developer is ineligible to use those funds to build out what is essentially a new space. But when the tenant comes in and the tenant needs HVAC and a bathroom and some plumbing and a new sign, that the tenants would be eligible to apply. So that is another small change.
Which in many cases is funded by the developer anyway.
And we are asking more questions this time around on, we want to know what the rent allowances, the TI allowances that are being given by the landlord. We want contact information for everybody, including if there's property manager. Many of the applicants, the first time around, the ones that really, and I was this way when I was a small business owner, really tried to scrap it together and do a lot of the work themselves. Those businesses took the longest to get open. They asked for extensions. The quality of work wasn't that great. Many of them ran through their TI allowance, ran through their rent allowance, and we're still not open. So we're gonna raise the bar a little bit higher this time around. Ask them that they do go get true contractors' estimates and design drawings. And it's, I think, for their own benefit. You know, they're gonna save the money. They think they're saving money, but 8 months down the line, when they've started to pay rent and have been red tagged by the city for code violations, they wind up paying those costs anyways. So we're gonna raise the bar a little bit more, a little bit higher for them to do a lot of the work. And
So
Mike Van Houten, for the record, what was the reasoning for excluding tattoo shops from the, because oftentimes those are the ugliest ones.
I will tell you, almost every other program I looked at across the nation still had the sin businesses listed as ineligible. You know, marijuana dispensaries, adult stores, and tattoo parlors. And so just modeling, you know, best practices of other cities.
Gotcha.
Looking for your input on whether we think that's sort of a legacy.
We
thing
are
more than-
different.
Yeah, yeah.
which they were in town.
I remember a time in Midtown where Midtown was tattoo parlors and check cashing, and everyone sort of associated that as the problem, but we've come a long way since then.
Kurt Stitzer, for the record, eligible improvements, sewer grease interceptors, backflow preventer upgrades, things like that. I know that in some of these older properties, you know, some of which I've looked at redeveloping and will work with prospective tenants to do. I think that that's a meaningful cost. It does not necessarily help with facades and perceptions and everything that we're trying to achieve with these funds, but I do think that you know, those are appropriate inclusions. But I think that maybe we need to discuss that. I mean, shit, there's buildings in Midtown with clay sewer pipes still, right? I mean, there's
And that's part of the
problems there that
Yeah.
are leaking, by the way.
And Brian McCarter, for the record, so that's part of the problem is we know that there are insurmountable challenges to get some of these storefronts back online, whether it's asbestos, collapsed pipes, infrastructure, that some of the property owners are just not willing to invest in. And so without that investment and without that incentive, these storefronts would remain vacant, blighted, and in the condition they are for the foreseeable future.
Colin Robertson, for the record, I share the skepticism about excluding tattoo parlors because it's just seems like a relic of bygone time.
Yeah.
But also, in those eligible areas are a great number of small nonprofit owners or tenants of these spaces. So I would strongly encourage that nonprofits be eligible users of those resources because they tend to be able to leverage the matching. If they do it well, they can leverage the matching funds philanthropically as much as from an investment standpoint.
And the reason why nonprofits were deemed ineligible, we did fund a few nonprofits, Brian McCarter, for the record. For instance, we gave the National Auto Museum all facade money for all their landscaping in the exterior of their building. This came up with the university's new business school, is that because we're tax increment funded, these nonprofits don't pay property tax, so we actually don't see the improvement value when we do those things, but happy to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I think, I'll use my workplace as an example. It's a $60 million investment in downtown Reno that is not funded by any public money and generates an enormous increment itself by people visiting and so forth. Whether it's a for-profit business or a not-for-profit business, it will do the same thing. I get that there's a distinction on paying property taxes are paid by all, but I think that should be something that's reviewed, because nonprofits are not paying sales tax, but they are paying for their use of their spaces, just as any other does.
And Mike Van Houten, for the record, I definitely agree with Colin. I think just because they don't pay in property tax shouldn't want to look at that as like the sole motivator for this program. Because if a nonprofit has a big presence downtown and a facade improvement or something like that would, they're interested in that, there's a huge public benefit to that too. Because, for example, our town's offices is a nonprofit too. And if they wanted to do some improvements right there on First Street, which is, pretty much right next to the Lear, I wouldn't necessarily want to exclude them either. And so there's a whole suite of nonprofits, I think, that I'd like to see that included as eligible too. And tattoo shops. Gotta keep Reno edgy,
Kurt Stitzer, for the record, on the counterpoint, I mean, the money that comes to fund these projects comes from property taxes. Right, so we're not getting a return on investment other than, the improvement of light or modernization of facades. From a visual perspective, we're not actually realizing the return. So not that I'm inclined to vote one way or the other specifically.
Yeah.
Because there's good points on both, but I just wanted to bring up the contrary.
Nettie Oliveria, for the record, we have, of course, our next discussion about retail downtown. And again, if we want to just up the level of foot traffic around and the desirability of being downtown, having nicer facades, whether you're a for-profit business or a nonprofit business, paying property tax or not, the aggregate is, if we look better, more people be walking around and buying things.
Yeah, Mike Van Houten, for the record, I agree with that. And what if a museum, wants to open a neon sign museum downtown, for example, as a nonprofit? I'd love to see them, get a facade improvement grant or award, and I'd hate to see them excluded just because they were a nonprofit museum when they would actually draw a huge amount of foot traffic downtown.
Carrie Harris, for the record, I would agree with that, and I think the nonprofits, most of them are adjacent to businesses who are paying property tax, and I think it just rises all things. And I think tattoo parlors are fine. I'd say maybe no on the adult shops. Just my opinion.
So dispensaries, sorry, Mike, you were gonna say something?
No.
I've got something. This is Paul Klein. Seeming that the retail and the vitalization being the goal, I would question whether we want to put in professional services that don't generally cater to retail. So if you're a CPA or an attorney's office, there's a lot of folks like that are sitting in those buildings. So something to consider along the lines of why you would exclude health professional services.
Thank you, Paul. As this is a item for discussion only. We're just sending notes back.
Just taking your input, yeah.
Yep. Any other comments or thoughts from members of the board? Thank you. On to item C2 then, for the retail attraction campaign strategy, also for discussion only.
Thank you. So Brian McCarter for the record. In the budget that was approved this year, we set aside $150,000 to focus on a retail attraction campaign. I think Restore was one part of this, which is to get these, if we attracted a ton of businesses right now to the downtown and some of these areas, there wouldn't even be storefronts readily available to accept them. So I think Restore was one part of that. Even with Restore, especially with round one, there is a lot of hesitancy in our high traffic areas that the property owners are still not taking us up on those opportunities. There are through the mayor, there's been an incredible effort put on trying to connect with every single large property owner in the downtown area. Those conversations have happened. Some have been supportive. I think, we got Junkie downtown, the Byington building on the corner there, that definitely came from a conversation with the mayor to get them to move. But something is going on still that we cannot get some of these things reactivated. I ask people, they say, well, just put businesses in those places. And when you walk around the area, you realize how many of those storefronts don't even have for sale or for lease signs in them to begin with. We've had a challenge with real estate brokers not really wanting to take up and do infill. I thought this was unique to us, but as I learned more, it is kind of across the country that downtown inline infill is kind of hard to get your brokers to really focus on. Trying to see what other some of the challenges we've had. Go ahead. The size of the spaces are big. They're very deep. They're like 5,000 units, and they have a basement. So sometimes the rent is sometimes not the problem. I think. Well, one challenge with downtown specifically, rents are about $2 a square foot on average. But if you go do the CoStar report, there's on average no tenant allowance and 1 month free rent. If you go to Midtown, the rent in Midtown seems actually cheaper on paper. You get $2 a square foot in TI allowances and about 4 months on average free rent. So if anything, Midtown is more welcoming to new businesses than the downtown core is. So those are some of the challenges. Some of the solutions, we've thought about bringing in a consultant that does this. There's retail strategies, there's the retail coach. Our fear is that they're going to tell us everything we already know. When I go to read the reports they do for other cities, it's talk to your property owners, do a facade and tenant improvement program, work on code enforcement. And I think we've done all those things, and we just don't want to pay for a report that tells us the same thing. So we have this budget, and what we'd like to talk about and get your input on is, and possibly just throwing incentives and money at the problems. Do we have to create broker incentives? Do we have to further support small businesses going into these areas? One of the ideas as well, and Rachel's done a lot of work on this, is actually going in, and a lot of redevelopment agencies and downtown business improvement districts are doing it, where they go in, they will be the tenant in a space. They themselves will do all the TI build out, and they will do micro retail or some sort of pop up for 3 years. It either increases traffic, creates some critical mass, helps those businesses go off to their next permanent home. And then if anything, at the end of 3 years, you can let that property go and some good tenant can come in and you can possibly do that somewhere else. So looking for a discussion from you all on some of those ideas, anything else you come up with. We're willing to try anything at the moment. And this isn't uncommon with other downtown areas that have seen their sprawl happen. Rachel, do you want to add something?
May I add one more challenge
Yes.
that we've been talking about? Rachel
Sure.
McIntyre for the record. The other challenge that we have, and we experienced this with Jessica with Junkie, who took just an awesome risk in coming down here, but she was on an island. And so island effect is something else that we've been talking a lot about. And how can we tackle this problem with whatever incentive program we align on block by block? so that we're not asking any one business to come in on an island and then like they're surrounded by vacant storefronts and then maybe a couple blocks down is another one. So thinking strategically about the placement for how we
Sure.
as well.
And Brian McCart, for the record, I will give a shout out to the Downtown Marina Partnership. They have done two things. They've created this booklet called the State of Downtown Report, which is a 1 mile circle of all the demographics. When you look at 1 mile, the data looks a lot better. When you look at the downtown proper, it says within 1 mile, we have 21,000 residents. And, you know, for grocery stores and things like that, 21,000 is unique enough. But we're already serviced by the Rayleighs up on Keystone and Save Mart and Great Basin, as well as Marketon and Midtown is actually, I think, within that 1 mile. But when you just look at the data, we're about 4,700 residents just in RDA1's area. But they did do that State of Downtown report, shows how many workers are down here, demographics, incomes, things like that. And then they just recently did a retail opportunities booklet that essentially made a little short one-sheeter on every downtown storefront, the square footage, the condition, a link to LoopNet. And so if any small businesses are looking for a space, that booklet can be handed to them to say, you might want to look at any of these areas, especially now that we have Restore available. You know, find a spot, take the Restore money, do you think? So that I'll kind of leave it.
Mike Van Houten for the record. I love the idea of retail pop-up program. In fact, I did some researching in downtown LA, which is where I grew up. And they have a really successful pop-up program. And sometimes the retail is in there for a few weeks. Sometimes it's in there for a few months. And I think a couple actually ended up being permanent. But I guess my question is, have property owners been receptive to that idea yet? And also, if these pop-up retails go in some of these buildings, how does that jive with like code enforcement? Like, could a pop-up retail go in a building and not have to do all of the same kinds of improvements to get it up to code that a standard retail tenant would? Or how would that work? Because I think a lot of our buildings are not in a great state, right? And so could pop-up retail even go in those?
Yeah, Brian McCarr, for the record, everything would have to be brought up to code.
Yeah.
There's no way we would do that.
It's a life safety issue.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
You know, it would be, I think some of the public criticism and feedback would be that, you know, we would be doing public-private partnerships with some legacy property owners who haven't made that investment themselves. And so why are we coming in and helping them when they have refused to do this themselves? But those are the obstacles, those are the roadblocks we're dealing with. And if we don't offer something, we're not going to get anywhere farther than we currently are. So
it seems to me that I really appreciate and admire the thoughtfulness about not paying for another report that's going to tell us what we already know.
Yeah, for sure.
But we can also learn from other places' reports, and you're pretty crafty at that, I've noticed.
it's a hack that you just get someone else's report and it tells you everything. Yeah.
Which I think is very valuable. But one of the challenges that I see in some of these spaces that we're talking about is that the sheer scale of that is just the retail environment is so different from when Woolworths was there.
Yeah.
Or what have you. People just don't.
You're talking about Keith Mary's building?
Well, I'm just talking about like, you know, large spaces that are, you know, many retail places in Reno might, you know, never be able to fill 5,000 square feet. They might be able to fill 1,000, you know, so it's like, if there are people, I don't know, JLL, I know does some of this, but like those kinds of reports that might have addressed similar kinds of issues in other communities where they had large scale retail, how did those communities address it so that somebody who could take 1,000 square feet would, but they can't take 5,000 square feet.
Nettie Oliveria for the record, there, you know, thinking back to our historical active downtown when we had shopping downtown, amazing. We had parking on the street, and so it was easy to push in and go to Menards or Lloyd Gotchi's or what have you, and we don't have that now. So There are a lot of studies around that talk about that, the proximity from your car to getting in the door. And on the basis of that, what those studies say, the Virginia Strait Corridor is not the natural evolution of this, but the cross streets are. Like Second Street would be ideal to start looking at as storefronts. Depth, as you said, is an issue, and we see that in Truckee. They have these, little tiny storefront areas, but they go back a gazillion feet. And no current marketer today uses that. That might be storage for something, but if they're paying, a regular per square foot for that, they're going, no, too much, I can't use that. So, thinking about that. Another problem that we have though, just in our immediate downtown, looking back at whatever happens with the Riverside Theater, they have all of those little storefronts there. None of them has a restroom, because the plan was that whoever was in there with the shop was gonna, close up for a second and go into the cinema. So that's an issue about renting there. And pop-up or no pop-up, who's gonna do that if you have no place to go to the restroom?
Kara Harris for the record. Brian, have we thought about incentivizing some businesses that are currently doing well in other areas to come down and do pop-ups, established businesses that already have a following and already a draw? I'm using Colin's place of business as an example, which they are close enough that they don't need to, but they oftentimes do sort of pop-up with specific retailers in the very front of Nevada Museum of Art that are really lovely and beautiful and do great gifts and things. Are there surrounding areas that we can incentivize some of those to come in for a 3-month pop-up just to draw people in and to start that traffic down there? I think that would be a really good opportunity for people to have a secondary location, especially coming into holiday seasons or big festival seasons. Second to that is that backspace, as Nettie was talking about. Is there availability to close off those backspaces and use them for storage, data facilities, things like that for the infill of downtown, so that space can be rented separately from that front office space? Because to me, that's perfect space to house, computers, to house data places for those businesses downtown in these high rises, and then the front unit be used in a different manner. So I think looking at it in dual spaces and using our existing businesses that are really thriving to help start. If you have 2 or 3 really thriving businesses starting a pop-up down there, it's easier for perhaps a new entrepreneur to come in where they're adjacent to that so that they both can thrive. So I think a mix of new and old would be really beneficial for that.
Does the city, Kurt Stitzer for the record, is the city of Reno still on West Street?
Yes,
No.
we own the West Street Market.
The West Street Market.
We own, we don't own the market, we own the
Plaza.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Cause isn't that a similar
the center
concept to the
space.
pop-up? I mean,
Yes.
or how it operated over the last however many years? And how did that perform for the city of Reno?
Kara Harris for the record. The thing about that to me was it was very restaurant focused, and I think that retail and restaurant need to combine, but I think to your point, Kurt, you can only go to those restaurants once, or you're not going to pop around to restaurant to restaurant to restaurant. I think a good mixed use of space, it would be far more successful than perhaps West Street Market was, because there wasn't a lot of other opportunity for retail and things. It really was restaurant focused.
Mike Van Houten for the record. Sorry, go ahead.
You're bringing in existing tenants who are seeing success in other areas to try a smaller scale down seasonal version or something like that in other cities, other markets, and here as well. So, yeah.
Mike Van Houten for the record. I know that the Downtown Reno Partnership is renovating one of their two buildings at the old city center to kind of be like a economic development arm or kind of offices to give people tours of downtown with Nathan. Is there any opportunity to kind of partner with them on drawing business or retail downtown, or kind of aligning campaigns with what they're doing?
Brian McCarl, for the record, there's always opportunity. If they're willing to use their space, we would work with them like we work with any other property owner downtown.
I also noticed in here the incentive stuff. I've got my own opinion about broker incentive programs, but might work, I don't know.
We would love to, Rachel McIntyre for the record.
Can you tell us pros and cons of going that route? Or is there?
I mean, I think it would have to be a pretty meaningful incentive to get brokers to pay more attention. And can the program afford that? And B, I have mixed feelings about commercial brokers generally. The other thing though in here is that's noted in here is fee waivers, which we haven't discussed here. I mean, is that contemplated as like building permit and connection fees and stuff like that? And what's the city's appetite for something like that? Because from a developer's perspective, I mean, those are big line items in any underwriting budget. I mean, a small TI is not that big of a deal, but you know, depending on the use type, especially restaurants and stuff, you start getting sinks and, you know, sewer fixture counts, and those numbers can get up there real quick. And so I think that could be fairly powerful.
So Ashley Attorney, Assistant City Manager for the record. So I think one thing to add to that is that this would be, we use the word waiver, however, this would be RDA funds being utilized to pay for those fees. The general fund obviously is not, if you've seen anything in the news, we're not in a position to subsidize any project. Additionally, the building fund would also not be in a financial position to be able to waive that, and sewer fund waivers have already been expended. That's only allowed by state law for affordable housing projects. One incentive that we did bring forward is the council voted to change the Reno Municipal Code that allowed for the sewer caps to be extended. So we took off the lifetime of when the sewer expiration, I was like, what do we call this? So that's something that those live on our perpetuity now. So that is one incentive that has already been put into to try to help stimulate some of the building.
Okay.
So we can't afford to waive it. That would be where your RDA funds as an incentive could be utilized.
Kara Harris for the record. I do think that the broker incentive, if you targeted new brokers, wouldn't have to be as aggressive. I think that there is a set of new brokers. There's a developing leaders program through NAOP that kind of services and sort of uplifts newer brokers. And I think they'd be more incentivized because they're likely not getting paid. So, and they're new in their business to, if you brought them in and did really a full training on why and how and the incentive for their clients to be put into there, I think that it could work with new brokers. I think it just has to be very targeted, but I do think that there's opportunity there.
It's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Jay Kenny for the record. Do we have any statistics right now that show how many businesses are closing to how many businesses are opening right now in the area?
Ashley Attorney, Assistant City Manager for the record. I can tell you that we are generally about flat. What you hear in the news of this business is closing, what you're not hearing is the business that's opening. In business licensing, we average about 250 new business license applications every month, and we close about 225. So we are maintaining about average, and that has been actually very consistent over the last 5 years. Is we've seen the number is not growing, however, it is not decreasing. So status quo.
This is maybe beyond the scope of what you want, but seems to me that if there are going to be as many downtown residents as there are in the long run, that there's a need for a more accessible site for storage. So that if a space was hybridized
Yeah.
as storage on the backside, that somehow the improvements were constructed to create storage spaces near to where people are living. And that the front spaces being smaller storefronts. We're reutilizing spaces for different purposes.
At the Montage, Mike Van Houten, for the record, they actually had that idea to create a rentable storage service space before that developer ended up passing away. So that is a great idea. And I remember him saying it was sorely needed downtown. For anybody that lives in an apartment building or condo can probably relate.
We did have that discussion with them, Brian McCart, for the record. The last thing I'll say about having those really deep storefronts with the basements, you're right in that back in the day, we walked through some and they have conveyor belts because they used to do manufacturing in the basement and put on the conveyor belt and package it and then put on loading trucks in the alleyway. And so the point there being that we have great alleyway access. And so you could, if you get enough critical mass, you could actually have storefronts and businesses face the alley and split those spaces so that they are facing the alley so that somebody doesn't have to take so much square footage. But if you're looking at a 5,000 square foot very deep space and it's $1 a square foot, that's $5 grand a month for a small business that's starting out. That's quite,
It's a lot.
yeah, that's quite a bit.
So Jay County, for the record, it really comes down to the guys that own these places downtown. They really need to start splitting the spaces up. And how do you do that? How do you get them in their own building to start splitting these up to even, I mean, that's the only chance you're gonna have. So you get it on the spot. You're not gonna get, you know, these small businesses or, I don't know, juice stop or a little jewelry store. You know, if there's 5,000 or 1,000 foot spaces, you know, there's your opportunity. But until that happens, it's gonna be pretty tough. No one's gonna take that much square footage. I mean, look at, I mean, they can't even fill red right now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we pushed so many people out of downtown to go through Midtown. And we spent so much money on that, you know, revitalization, right? We pushed them down, we pushed them down, we pushed them down. And now we're asking, push you back, push you back, push you back, right? So I agree. How do you get those people to come back? I mean, the first thing is you gotta have smaller units.
Big sack of carrots.
Yep.
Yeah, Brian McCarter, for the record, I always say cities breathe in and then they breathe out.
Yep.
In like 20-year cycles.
Yep.
The best thing is that we have probably 2,000 new residents coming downtown once all these downtown units fill up. And so you will have the natural foot traffic to support new spaces. And then I'll sort of create a self-fulfilling cycle. But what we're proposing is possibly a pop-up. We would go in and take up the space and split it up ourselves, pay for the cost to do that. If an existing landlord sees the value in doing that, they can right now take the restore program and do those improvements. It's just that we might have to layer on and stack some of our proactive activities on top of what the restore is doing to move the needle a bit and to create some momentum. And as Rachel said, critical mass so that people feel safe going down here. It creates a bit of activity and then it can naturally maybe organically expand from there.
So you already had talks with these guys who've had these vacant properties for years about splitting it up? And they still don't want to do anything, they just want to leave it vacant?
It comes down to 3 types of people. One, they believe that once Harris is done, their properties are going to be worth a lot of money. So they've been waiting since 2018, so 7 years now, on some good news. They have an attachment to the legacy of the business because it's 3rd generation. And people have commented that that is not the way you should honor your family's legacy, by having a very blighted downtown building, regardless of what it means to your family's history. And then last is just absentee property owners that maybe don't even live here anymore, that's in their portfolio because of our sales tax or because of our property tax structure in Nevada. There's no holding costs. These things get fully depreciated and no one cares. And so we are trying to work as many levers as we can to move the needle and change some behavior.
Mike Van Houten, I know with the placemaking, the Virginia Street placemaking study, a huge piece of that was the casinos putting pop-up retail or pop-up anything along the sidewalks on the exterior of their businesses or parking garages that are inactivated. Has there been any movement on that? And I'd also like to see Whitney Peak. I know they're also a major player and they have that vacant retail under their garage right on Virginia Street. That would be another great candidate. I don't know why no one is leasing that space or if they're even offering to lease that space, but maybe that could be split up into multiple spaces and kill two birds with one stone, because I know the activation of Virginia Street is pretty paramount.
I want to just note that Mr. Art Rangel has his hand raised, but Mr. Rangel, if you will hold your comment for the public comment area under item F, we'll come back to you. Any other comments or thoughts on item C2? Open.
I guess I have one question. If we're talking about potentially doing this pilot pop-up program and helping through the RDA incentivize some of this redevelopment, what kind of budget do we have?
Brian McCardle for the record. So in the budget, which you all recommended approval, we have $150,000 this fiscal year for this.
Not gonna go very far.
No, but we can budget. If we go into a space and sign a 3-year lease and use those funds to do some TIs to get the building up to code, we would put year 2 and 3 in those future year budgets. So this year would be considered the startup cost needed for that.
Rachel McIntyre for the record, we've looked at, back to the block by block mentality. What are the most desirable locations to start this project with the intent to build on it throughout the year?
Without being, Brian McCart for the record, without being our own broker, we may have to identify a site, put the money in the site, and then go out there and do our own hunting to go find the tenants for that site. I just want to get feedback from the group that everyone's sort of comfortable with us doing that, because there may be some thoughts and feelings about that in the general public.
Colin Roberts for the record, I mean, sort of assuages the junkie issue on the island. Is like, it kind of needs a proof of concept, and you can't do that a mile wide and an inch deep. You have to pick a site, take those limited resources, show people, lead them there, and say, here you go.
Yeah.
It can't happen. It has to happen in a concentrated way for the
Yeah.
creation of that to function.
Kara Harris, for the record, have you thought of, I don't know if you can do this, but have you thought of partnering with a brokerage firm that's committed to going at this with you?
Brian McCarter for the record, we've met with every broker so far. Some were interested in being a part of this. It is hard. They get interest from discount cell phone stores, check cashing, or liquor stores, and their landlords aren't willing to put in the funds. That's why Restore was the first line of defense for this, as an incentive to try to get them to do it. Had a lot of broker conversations. It is so easy to follow the next In-N-Out and Panera and help fill in the shopping centers, empty spaces when they get a new In-N-Out there. And that's the low-hanging fruit. But we really do need some hungry brokers. And your comment earlier is finding young, hungry brokers. There is some, if someone just made that their niche, they could be quite successful in this community.
Carrie Hirsch for the record, I think working through that developing leaders program could be very fruitful.
Okay.
Well, you're definitely creating
Yeah.
a curated environment. Nettie Olivieri record, so it makes total sense that you would go after it yourselves.
Yeah. And Mike Van Houten, for the record, we did this once already with West Street Market. To my knowledge, that was a redevelopment agency project, and they went out and they got the tenants, they did the marketing. and basically kind of made that space successful, right, Brian?
Yeah, I would say, regardless of the churn that property sees, I would say it's an improved property that does add value to that section of West Street. It gives an opportunity for other businesses to take on small spaces, and so it's gone through some evolution and some life cycles, but the concept still is really good. It's a well-designed space, it's flexible, and it gives small operators a chance to.
Yeah, and it was headed by the redevelopment agency.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, and Nettie Oliverio also, Arts and Culture Commission did that for a while. It fell in ANC's lap, and ANC went out and found players as well. And it's true, Mike, what you're saying is that was, it was dynamic for what it was. It was almost like pop-ups, you know, where everybody was going, oh, this is cool, let's do. And there was a real vibrancy. And then when the pieces went other places, then it broke apart. And so that too is part of the, you know, the next step of that. Yes, you get something really going, but if it's all pop-up, then how do you solidify it and sustain it?
Mr. McIntyre. I was just gonna correct something in the record for my previous statement, Ashley Kearney, Assistant City Manager. You're correct that we no longer own it. I was thinking the top section of West Street Plaza, that one lease. So that is fully out of the city's inventory and RDA.
Rachel McIntyre for the record. An interesting note with West Street Plaza is while they've had turn, they also have like pretty significant tenure for 4 of their restaurants that have been there for 5+ years now, with Tolly Pizza Collective, Sabrina's, which did just close, but have been there for 7 years, and the Wine Bar House had 5 years there. I think one of the challenges that we can identify in pop-up programs is when they aren't properly marketed and strategically curated. So I think that can be one of the challenges that we see West Street currently having, as an example. And there are companies that we've been researching all over the country who actually run pop-up retail activations and programs and form kind of that matchmaking service, if you will. So if we decided to go this route, we decided we wanted to work with a third party that our service providers that currently work with municipalities on this exact solution.
Anything?
Thank you. Any other items on that, C2? Not, we'll move to item D, committee member reports and any announcements not addressed in the agenda elsewhere.
I mean, I've got one and it's impacts me personally, so that's why I'm involved. But I've been talking to Brian and a number of folks about the impact to existing businesses. I know we always talk about redevelopment is new startups and fixing things that are broken, but you know, the plan for the Sears Street Bridge and the impact that that's going to have on a number of businesses could be a pretty meaningful thing. And I don't know if there's any action that can be taken at this RAD level or the RDA board, but yeah, that's something that, you know, the third of the 3 downtown bridges that is being redone is going to have a bigger impact on this existing businesses than any of the others have.
Yeah. And Mike Van Outen, for the record, it's unfortunate that RTC isn't going to do the same kind of program for those businesses that they did for Midtown. I think it was in a prior meeting that it was mentioned that they weren't going to do that, unfortunately.
Brian McCarroll for the record. We have a few years to figure that out, so we have time to plan and have this body discuss strategies that we can do to help mitigate challenges. So I'll put that out there.
Any other? I mean, I guess I'll just add on that Colin Robinson for the record. I think that there are probably lessons to be learned from the Arlington Street Bridge project as well, because you cannot, I walk a lot downtown and you cannot walk alone.
Yeah.
Go a long way out of your way to get to those places. And be very creative about like, how do you get back down to First Street from there?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I meant, Mike Van Houten, for the record, is that RTC isn't really doing the same kind of public outreach with that project as they did with Midtown, is with the Arlington Bridge project. And I know those businesses are kind of hurting, Hukava in particular.
Any other items? So item E on the agenda is for future agenda items. That's perhaps part of what members deserve. Oh, was requesting, I think.
We jumped off of C2 before we gave Art an opportunity to speak.
Oh,
Mentioned that we would come back to him in public comment.
Any other future agenda?
I guess I would just call him Robinson for the record. I'm very interested in placemaking. I've been along for a long time, and what the Downtown Reno Partnership has been able to do and what they're working toward in terms of some of their economic development goals and so forth. I think there's some placemaking kinds of incubation that would be interesting to talk about as a group, and what kinds of placemaking is happening in cities across the country that are perhaps, examples of successes and challenges along the way, because that can be incubated. And
yeah.
that has economic impacts as well. So I'd like some future meeting.
Yeah. Mike Van Houten, for the record, since we're talking about retail, and I know one of the goals of the Downtown Reno Partnership is to draw retail downtown, I'd love to see a future agenda item where maybe Nathan comes and gives us a presentation on his efforts and what exactly he's doing to bring business and retail downtown.
And challenges he's seen.
Yeah, and challenges he's seeing.
Seeing no other comments, we'll move to item F, public comment, and come back to Mr. Rangel, who's been patiently waiting.
Thank you for the opportunity. Relative to the challenges in downtown, being a resident down there, and there's still a really bad perception of downtown. And it's not just perception, it's reality. The amount of crime that's down there, this is what redevelopment's all about. It's where an area gets into blight and the private sector doesn't want to invest. So until that gets cleared up, it's going to be very difficult to get quality people down there. And relative to critical mass is more than just how many residents you have in a market area. It's also about discretionary income. I'm concerned that all we're going to develop downtown is low and moderate income housing, and you're never going to get the kind of retailers you want down there. Relative to the issue of opening up the casinos, look at what they did with, Whitney Peak. That used to be a casino. He actually turned it into something that is unique to our region. He did the same thing with the Renaissance. These casinos, once they go out, can be, or even if they're in operation, they can continue to be viable to the community. The issue of the red, is really a good development, but people can't afford to live there. Why can't they? Because it gets back to the issue I brought up earlier. We need to attract higher paying jobs to the region so the people coming in can afford market rate rent instead of have it subsidized, and they have discretionary income to benefit the entire community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Rangel. Any other public comments online or in the room? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Art Stitzer, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Nettie Oliverio, second.
Thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you to those online and to Mike and Paul for tuning in. Distances. Next meeting scheduled for
September 8th, because the 1st is Labor Day.
See you later.
Thank you all.
Thank you.